I'm Heather.
And I'm Derek.
And this is Let's Talk Outdoors.
Today we're chatting with Joyce Belcher. Joyce is a biologist, life coach, and writing teacher. She spent a good portion of her life being inspired by big skies, intact prairie grasslands, and forest trails.
Join us as we chat about Joyce's time in the prairies and her way of connecting to nature. Joyce, welcome to Let's Talk Outdoors. And I'd like to start off by learning a little bit more about yourself and how you wound up on the path that you are currently on.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's kind of a winding path. I grew up outside of Winnipeg on an acreage with a family that had a big garden, and we did lots of camping. And I was lucky enough to have a horse and then 2 horses when I was young. So I spent a lot of time on the back of a horse. I'd be gone for a whole day exploring. I wish my kids could have had that kind of freedom, but it was amazing. And I would just head off. I had a friend, we took our horses, our dogs, and we were gone all day. And it was really great to be able to explore and have that freedom. So that's really a big part of who I am today. In fact, all the way through my life, I've carried that moving through nature as the way I really connect with a place and with nature. So I developed a pretty strong social and environmental conscience early on. And I did a degree at the University of Manitoba in biology. And then I had some great work working on prairie research at the Shiloh Military Reserve between Winnipeg and Brandon, looking at the effects of tank traffic, amongst other things, on native prairie, but spending amazing time on the native prairie there. It was fabulous. Living in an ATCO trailer in the backyard of my supervisor's yard. So 2 summers I spent there doing really good research and helping with some publications and so on. So that was a great job to have during and just out of my Bachelor's of Science. And I traveled for a bit, and then I moved to Ottawa and did a master's in plant ecology there. And we moved here, my husband and I moved here to Regina in, doesn't matter what year, many years ago now, so that I could work as the ecologist at the Saskatchewan Conservation Data Center that was just starting up as part of the Nature Conservancy Network. And I spent 5 years in that job, getting to lots of wonderful places in Saskatchewan, particularly prairie. And that was a great job too. And but then I got really interested in what matters to people and what makes us interested in conservation. And I got really interested in what makes people love nature and how we need to love it in order to want to conserve it. So I then went and did a part-time master's of education in educational psychology and parented new children at the same time. So that master's took a little longer because I was home with kids a lot. And I got very interested there in the whole process of what I call engagement, where when we really get into something and time it just goes by so quickly. And that's something that I got fascinated by, and creativity came into my life then. So then I parented for a lot of years, and then I took life coach training so that I could work with people one-on-one, and all the while writing as a way to figure out what I have to say, what I know. And I didn't really think of it as a thing until I came across some training on what's called wild writing. And so I took that training because it felt like the perfect fit. And so since 2018, I've been teaching what I call true nature writing, which is a way to help people connect with themselves, connect with what I call our own true nature and nature. And so it's really process writing. It's not so much about the craft and the product of writing, it's about the actual process of writing. So I have a small business now where I teach writing classes, and I do some life coaching as well. And at the same time, I've got a big yard with a big garden, and I like to cycle and kayak and camp and move through nature, as I mentioned. Walk. Thank goodness for walking in the last 18 months, I'll tell you that.
You said something that I've heard a few times, and I've thought and said to myself, of where like people need to get to know nature and love nature in order to care about it. In your time, you said you were kind of thinking about or looking at like what makes us love it. What did you find? Like how do we connect people?
Yeah, I think that's why I do what I do. I think it's being in nature and finding a way to have a sort of personal relationship with it, a way that I connect with this particular place and you connect with this particular place. And so we all have our own reasons for why we like a particular place or feel some power there. I was thinking a lot about the pasture managers that looked after those amazing pieces of prairie on the provincial and PFRA pastures that unfortunately are not looked after in the way they were. And, you know, those people, they just loved that land and looked after it so well. And it was quite different than the scientific exploration of those places, which is also important. But just, you know, living on it and knowing it and feeling how this area that's in really great shape compared to this area that's been previously tilled, or just it feels different, and people can sense that. I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's sort of where my interest came from.
Okay. And Joyce, this could be jumping to a completely different place, but this just popped into my mind. So your original background was in biology.
Yes.
And now you've moved not necessarily away, but more toward writing and nature writing. I'm wondering if you felt like a shift a couple of years ago, so in 2018 when you started your business, from looking at nature through more of a scientific lens and now through more of a creative lens, and yeah, whether you notice that or if you think they went hand in hand and you didn't even recognize a shift.
It's definitely a shift. It's kind of a gradual one. The move to doing a degree in educational psychology was part of that. And the coaching was part of that. And in fact, a lot of what happens when we gather together to write, it kind of magically is what might happen when I'm coaching someone one-on-one. It's actually kind of a healing process as well. It's kind of a way of really getting to know ourselves. But one thing that I guess you could say was an obstacle was it took me a long time to kind of give myself permission to move away from the science and the conservation and feeling like I was engaged in the cause from that end, feeling like a little bit of a traitor. You know, I've got all this training and I'm not actually engaged in conservation work. It took me some time to realize, but this is where my strength is. This is where my passion is. And so, yes, but over a gradual shift.
How would you describe true nature writing? You said kind of like it's a connection between the like nature itself and our own like nature. Can you flesh that out a little bit more?
Well, I can tell you how a class goes, how the process goes. Great. It's actually really simple. Generally, we meet for an hour and a half or two, and I choose poetry or beautiful pieces of prose, and we go one at a time. I read a poem a couple of times and give people some jump off lines, and then I set a timer and we write. And at the end of that time, then we actually share what we've written. So it sounds a little scary, but it's in a group and we read what we've written without any kind of introduction or apology or kudos for one another other than thank you. And in the sharing, we hear what we've written and we hear what other people have written, and we're inspired by one another. And something happens there because we're in community. And I'll choose poetry kind of based on what's going on with me, what's going on in the world. And if we're lucky enough to be in a nature setting, which is my absolute favorite way to do this, then often what comes into the writing is that experience. And that's the best part. But I do tend to choose writing for inspiration that has some of that flavor to it. But it's, people are surprised that the whole idea is that you're kind of mining things that you might have forgotten or that you don't even realize is going to come up. And so people surprise themselves and generate these fragments of writing. They're not usually something that's a finished piece, but it can be shaped into a finished piece, or maybe just on its own, there was some kind of insight that came from that writing that's meaningful. Maybe what I read is not meaningful particularly to me, and I think, oh, that wasn't a very good writing, but the person across the table got something from it too. So that's a nice part of the writing in community.
Yeah, that I might interpret, I might take a teaching or something from something that you've written or connect with it in a different way.
Right, or suddenly remember your own experience that you had forgotten.
Yeah.
And then we'll do that 2 more times, usually in a session, in a class.
That sounds pretty sweet.
Yeah. And actually, sorry, Joyce and Derek, I wasn't completely ignoring everything. I was just thinking, Derek, you might not have known that I actually took one of these classes from Joyce a couple of years ago at the Ecom pre-conference.
I had an inkling that you might have, because at one of our board retreats, we did a session similar to this.
And so I was like, oh, I actually have the book in my office right here. So it was May 8th in 2019. And I remember sitting around the table in a group of people that we didn't necessarily know, but we were becoming comfortable with. And the horror of the people to share their writing, like with other people. Because I mean, there was a group from like all walks of life and all ages, and just sitting down and writing. It was such a like cathartic experience, I would say, for everyone. And I remember the people who were most nervous to write and most nervous to read it out loud, they just knocked it out of the park. And you wanted to tell them like, wow, that was amazing. But Joyce, like you said, you encourage people to just say, thank you, and move on. So then there's like no pressure. Yeah, it was a really great experience. And I can only imagine how beneficial that is to other people who take your classes, Joyce.
Oh, thank you. It's always interesting that moment where people are experiencing it for the first time. And I can sort of see people's eyes shift and think, where's the door? But the thing is, what I've noticed, and maybe you can tell me if this was true in your experience, people do it once and they go, oh, that was kind of cool. That actually felt pretty good. And when people take classes, I offer classes in multi-week sessions. And after a while, it's like people just want to do it. It just feels good to read and to share. And part of the process is kind of outrunning our inner editor. We're writing as quickly as possible and not worrying about punctuation and getting the words right, try not to cross out. And but it's not until we read that we kind of know what we said. And so it does feel good. And people kind of get that after a while. I can see if it's we're a little short on time and not everyone can read, you can see there's people going, oh, I really wanted to read. Yeah. So it sort of turns around.
And I think the discomfort that some people feel is really important, because it's a wonderful way to learn. And it's something that I haven't forgotten in that weekend of amazing experiences at we stayed at Elk Ridge Resort area and toured the boreal forest there.
And that's true. It's part of it is actually getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, which is a pretty useful life skill, actually.
Yeah.
So I guess for the average person who wants to engage with nature, Do you have any advice for them about maybe incorporating writing into their journey?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say carry a notebook. Always carry a notebook or a file card or anything that, or your phone, a place that you can record some things so that, we often see something that we're inspired by, or we just, look at that sunset or something that just feels good. And we think we're going to remember, but to actually take some notes in the moment or as soon as you get back is a really good practice. But the other part that I've noticed personally is when I go out in nature is to kind of go with the intention of being interested, being surprised, being noticing things. Like the Mary Oliver quote, I've got it in the front of this little handmade notebook I have. Attention is the beginning of devotion. Attention is the beginning of devotion by Mary Oliver. And that's kind of a core of what I think this is all about, is if we're paying attention, then we do connect with nature in a different way. So I often carry a camera when I walk. And what I find is it slows me down. And if I see something that interests me, I'll try and take the photo the moment I'm in the place that interests me, not to get closer, but just to take the photo as it caught my eye. Or you don't even need a camera. I walk around with a little viewfinder, a little piece of paper with a square cut out of it. And it helps me notice things. So
interesting.
Yeah, and then the thing that happens is maybe even if I don't take notes and I'm doing a writing session a couple of days later or a couple of weeks later, and maybe a year later, something twigs that memory, that experience, and I find the details start to come back. And those are the places that have come into my writing that I feel most connected to. So I guess to go with intention, to notice, to be interested is probably the summary of all of that.
That's it's a big difference when you're like going on a hike or you're out and you're trying to get somewhere versus you're going to just kind of see what happens. I think for me, I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 18-month-old or 16-month-old, and they're very slow. And I'm usually like I'm like, let's get here, let's go, we're going to a place. But they're constantly noticing things. They're half my height, and so they're noticing other things, and it's really slowed down. I've seen so many more frogs or so many more insects or so many more, whatever that maybe I would not have seen, because they're always paying attention. So.
Oh yeah. So yeah, even better. Walk with a toddler.
Walk with a toddler. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I know that I love to walk. I'd love to do all these things, and I like to go fast. But oftentimes, I find myself the brain is just going, and I'm not even really seeing where I am or the amazing things around me, unless I have that intention to pay attention to what's there, or you get inspired to do so if you've got a little person pointing things out and asking questions.
There's a book called The Walking Curriculum by Gillian Judson, and it's geared towards like K-12 educators, and it's basically like go for 15 minutes of a walk, but not just for a walk, but focus on something. So there might be a walk that's you're looking for straight lines, or you pick a line and you walk a line, or you observe as you walk your path, you're trying to look for all things green, or you just whatever. And I use it with my grade 8 sometimes this year, and it was very interesting as we focused in on things that we notice a lot more. I likened it to like when I wanted to buy a truck or a new car or something, all of a sudden I start seeing that car everywhere. That once, kids see yarrow or something, now they're seeing yarrow everywhere they go, and they never ever saw it before, and they walk that same path.
Right.
So.
And they probably won't forget either.
Yeah.
I a couple of times I've enrolled in a photo prompt class. And so I head out every day. I did that early this spring, and it was developed. The one I took this spring, she was in California, so everyone else was way further along in the season, and we still had, mucky gray snow. And I thought, oh, I'm never going to be able to find beautiful pictures, but I did, and I was amazed at the beauty I found just by heading out with the intention to find that shot. So I know that's not writing, but that's what this is all about, is seeing.
Yeah.
So when I met you a couple years ago, Joyce, I also met your husband, Glenn Suter, and I've heard him on CBC radio since then a couple times, actually. And I know that it might be more down his path, but the Saskatchewan Songs for Nature you've been a part of for a couple of years. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, and maybe what your role has been in it, and if there were any highlights that you have from your time with the camp.
Well, suffice to say, it's my happy place. I absolutely love Songs for Nature. So originally, I was part of the research team, so I was just a research assistant. There is a research component to the Songs for Nature program, headed up by Catherine Arbuthnot at Campion College, University of Regina. And so I have assisted with that a little bit. And by the second time I was involved, I had done my training, and I said, how about if I offer a session of this writing? And everybody loved it. So it has become a central component of the program. So when we do a in-person camp at a nature setting, 2 of the 3 days, we pretty much start the day. Well, we start with yoga and have breakfast. And then one of the first things we do is sit down for a writing session. And it really kind of primes the pump for people. Sometimes song ideas come out of that writing. When people are working on a group song, there was one time when we were at Arlington Beach for a group camp, and people had been working together on the group song, and they were kind of running into some stuck places. So that day I kind of just threw out some prompts that had to do with their group song, and it brought them further along. So it's a great way for people to kind of bring in what they're experiencing, and some ideas show up. Maybe it turns into a song way down the way, or maybe it never does, but it just kind of gets their creative fires burning. And so yeah, I have offered the writing. I've been involved in food preparation. I've been involved in the research, and we did a couple of camps through the pandemic online, believe it or not. And they worked out. The research shows, not surprisingly, that nature connection didn't really increase as very much when we were meeting online, but in all the camps, one of the things that happens is, the research shows, is that people's anxiety and stress decreases, and in the camps where we're in a nature setting, certainly their nature connection increases, and it's quite a striking result. So it's really great to have that kind of data coming out of it, and it helps, get more funding and be able to do more of that, and of course add to the literature as well. So we're going to have another camp in September, fingers crossed. I think it's going to be possible in Prince Albert National Park. Yeah, so it's currently about half registered. By the time this episode airs, there may still be a few days to register. But if anyone's interested, they can look up Songs for Nature. That's 4 as the number 4. So songs, number 4, nature.ca. And they can see more about the program, some of the songs. They can hear some of the songs and the videos that have been produced. And there's a display at the Royal Sask Museum on this program as well.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so much fun.
So do you usually do them multiple times per year, or is this
Um, we have done spring camps. We've done fall camps. One year we did both. During the pandemic, we did a summer one and then figured, well, we can do a winter one if we're inside anyway. What would it be like to help people
right?
connect to nature with nature in the winter? So that was interesting as well.
And so how long has this camp been going for? And you said that you're at Prince Albert National Park in September, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
How long has it been running for, and what other places have you run the camp in?
I believe the first one was in 2015, and that was a youth camp. I was not involved in that one. And that happened at the Last Mountain Lake National Wildlife Area, and a fair bit of funding has come from there. So we kept having camps somewhere around Last Mountain Lake. So we did a couple of them, an adult one then at the same place at the National Wildlife Area, and then a third one at the regional park nearby. Then we did one at Moose Mountain Provincial Park, and then another one at Arlington Beach, which is on Last Mountain Lake. So we find places where we can camp and possibly have some cabins for people to stay in, because there's, different sort of desires for the kind of accommodation.
Right.
So at Prince Albert, some people will be tenting and some people will be in cabins. And so I think I've covered them all.
Can I just flip way back to the start for a moment? This has been in my head a little bit. We talked about lots of things about finding a love, building a connection to nature, just having that time. And you talked about having a lot of freedom in your childhood to explore, and how that really shaped who you are and your connection. I had a similar experience to that, right? You had lots of time just to go down by the river and just explore, hang out, ride your bikes, don't come back till supper, sort of thing. But I don't think that's the case for a lot of kids now. Have you seen, or do you have any, I'd just be interested in your thoughts on, do you think it's harder, easier for young people to build that connection now than it was before? Or are there things that we could do to help them out?
I think it's harder because, parents tend not to give their kids that much freedom. There's more concern about what can happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, my kids walk to and from school their entire school lives, but that's not the case for a lot of kids. A lot of kids get driven to and from school. I think we're fortunate in that we're not far away, and it felt completely safe for them to do that. Mm-hmm. But so that's part of it. I think the other, and when my kids listen to this, they'll be probably annoyed with me, but the, phones and video games and the reliance on the internet world, it's different. Yeah. It takes up a lot of time and a lot of attention, and is a priority in their lives, where we were bored. We were bored. So we went looking for things to do, and we made up things to do. And when I think of the hours that my brothers and I in the spring sat on a board across a huge inner tube, pushing ourselves along the ditches with a broken off hockey stick, falling in and getting wet and getting back on again. That was something we could do and wanted to do. One other thing I did in that wandering path of my career is I taught in the schools as a create teacher. So taking art into the schools. So I would be assigned a few different classrooms, and the idea was that the visiting artist would present an art project that also taught something in the curriculum. And so I did my very best to come up with something that would get them outside and in the schoolyard, and really getting to know their schoolyard, even if it was mostly gravel. And my favorite part was the maybe there were 3 or 4 students in a classroom where you could see their eyes kind of light up, and they were really talking about either their schoolyard or a place in their life that they know well.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe part of it is we just need to ask and listen to what they have to say.
There's as kind of a bridge between the technology and the outside world. There's an app called Seek by iNaturalist. Have either of you heard of this app before?
I've heard of iNaturalist. I've never heard of Seek.
Yeah, so Seek, it actually works pretty awesome. It's kind of like an augmented reality, I guess, in that you open up your camera and you can try to scan something. It'll live scan it, and it'll go, there's like, I don't know, 7 levels where it goes through. My biology is not as good as it should be, but it'll go through, like, I don't know, from the very top of, what would that be, the genus maybe, down to the species. And then once it can identify the species, you can take a picture, you can upload it, and other people can like help go with it. But they also have challenges, where you have to find this. And so my sons are quite excited now to go outside and, what is this? What is this? What is this? And they'll take a picture and they'll try to, can you get it? Get closer. It's been a kind of a fun game where it blends the two of like trying to be aware and also like learning, like, what is this creature? What is this plant or this bug or this bird or this whatever? So it's kind of
right. And making a game of it.
Yeah.
That's key.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that sounds cool.
Joyce, this might be jumping back as well, but how do you feel that writing has benefited you in your enjoyment of the outdoors?
So I said that I've kind of, for many, many years, I've written just as a way to kind of figure things out and figure out where am I right now and where am I headed? And so part of it is just kind of getting clear on what's important to me, what's my next step, what am I doing for a career, how am I changing my life path, and so on. So there's that part, which is kind of higher level. But since I've been writing and teaching writing and really focusing on not just kind of, like I said, the kind of discursive thinking, but the concrete details and which is what the most beautiful writing is made of, is the here and now. It's kind of a back and forth. Nature is a beautiful way to actually practice that. What I see outdoors, what I experience on a walk, to really get the details down, improves my writing skills and helps me write something that's more readable. And conversely, I really get to know a place. So yeah, just Natalie Goldberg says writers live twice. And that's just so true. We're out and about and we see things, but by writing it down, we re-experience it. And that has been huge for me. And there's a gratitude in that too. And we all know that gratitude is a pretty important part of well-being and, living in what can be a difficult world at times. And just by re-experiencing it, when we put it on the page, it brings that much more life to it. It's like that little moment that I might have just passed by. Oh, wait, that was a significant moment.
There have been a few quotes that you've mentioned tonight, Joyce, that I've been typing and writing down, and I've never heard the writers live twice, but I love that.
Yeah,
thanks for throwing those
true.
in there.
You're welcome.
Okay, Joyce. We have 2 questions that we ask everybody. So the first one is, what is your favorite place to adventure in Saskatchewan?
Well, I don't have one particular place, I have to say. So in general, it's the place that I am and where I can get to the most. So I have to say, over the last year and a half, it's kind of been my backyard. It's where I see things. It's where I connect with nature. Last summer, I was so happy being in my backyard, but it's always a place that I can get to know. So to answer in a way that might be more along the lines of what you're looking for, I love Duck Mountain Provincial Park, partly because it's not too far from Regina, so we get there fairly often. And we've gotten to know the campgrounds well. We've gotten to know some of the little lakes. Glenn and I were there at the end of June, and it was really, really windy, and I couldn't get my kayak out on the water very often. So we went into Batka Lake, tiny little lake, and I put my boat on the water there while he sat on a picnic table and played guitar and paddled around the entire shoreline. And that's my favorite thing to do, is really see what I can see. So anywhere that I can spend time and notice and take things slow and move are my favorite places. If I go back in time, going to some of those amazing pastures, though, like those are magical places. We're so lucky to have those huge expanses of native prairie, although I have trouble saying that without feeling sort of teary, because I'm not sure how safe they are.
Well, Joyce, I'm not sure if the safety of those pastures ties into this last question at all, but if you could change one thing about the world, what would it be?
Like anyone, probably there's many that would require time travel and going back in time. So if I think about where we are now and what I as one person can do, because I think that's what we all need to do, is I would have people know that what they do matters, that their small actions do make a difference, and that in fact, small is all we have. Small can be really big. And so if we do what we're good at, if we do what we have passion for and connect that with some of the big causes, then we're well positioned to make a difference in the world. So for people to know that, to know it doesn't have to be some huge, amazing thing that we get involved in. It can be small, and that matters.
Two very well thought out answers. Thank you so much, Joyce.
Very profound. I'm going to have a lot of things to think about tonight.
I know. My mind isn't working fast enough. Joyce, I guess before we say goodbye, where can people go to connect with you or learn more about you and the work that you're doing?
I have a website, and it's simply joycebelcher.com.
Do you have upcoming classes or anything like that?
I will have classes starting up again in September, probably near the end of September, after the Songs for Nature program takes place. And I'll have multi-week classes that I'll be offering via Zoom. And by the way, I've been using Zoom since 2018, but I've been very thankful for it in the last year. And I will see again how it goes, but I'm kind of hoping I'll be able to do some in-person classes here in Regina as well, starting again soon, because I really like being around the physical table as opposed to just the virtual table, but both work really well. So yeah, that's the place to look. And I hope some people check it out. Once in a while, I offer just a one-off class, so that I call them pop-up classes, so that if people just want to give it a try without a big commitment, they can do that as well.
It's been a pleasure learning from you, Joyce.
Yes, it really has been. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for the interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Agreed. So, Derek, what were your big takeaways from our chat with Joyce tonight?
Oh, man, there's lots of stuff to think about in what Joyce talked about. I think she talked about a couple of things that really stuck with me. She talked about how it's important to find a personal relationship with the land, and that, like, she was talking about, I think, the people who take care of prairie pastures, that they love the land, they take care of it, they know that land, they can feel that land. I thought about how, cool that would be, if you had a place like that where you knew, what the seasons are going to change, what it's going to look like, you spend so much time there that you just know every part of it. And I think that connection to land is really cool, and it really something to strive for and work on finding. I thought that was really good. The other thing that I really connected with, she talked about just going out with intention and being interested in trying to notice things and just pay attention while you're out, and the difference that can make in your connection to nature.
Well, you've stolen both of mine.
Oh, sorry.
So that's okay. And I had actually written down that same quote, like, we need to love it in order to preserve it.
Yeah.
Right before you mentioned it in our conversation with Joyce. And I went, darn, I'll come up with something different. But yeah. Oftentimes when I'm listening and learning from these people that we've been interviewing, I'm kind of looking for validation and to like tell myself, like, okay, what you're doing is okay.
You're on the right track.
And you're on the right track, and you don't have to feel guilty about doing this.
Yeah.
And I felt like I got that validation when Joyce said that her favorite place this past year has been her backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And I live in the city, and I believe Joyce even lives in the city. And sometimes I feel a little bit guilty when what my daughter is getting right now is mostly our backyard.
Mm-hmm.
But today my daughter and I went to the a spray pad close by.
Yeah.
And she was just terrified. And she loved just the only thing she liked was standing and watching other kids play.
Yeah.
And then the one time that water did actually touch her, she started screaming. And so I'm like, okay, this is fine, whatever. And then we went back home, and I started making lunch. And she's 2 years old, and she just said, like, I go backyard. And I said, okay, yeah, go for it. And then she grabbed her shovel, and she was playing in the backyard and just digging things up and putting them from shovel to shovel.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I thought, you know what? My favorite place is my backyard. And my daughter would probably say the same thing. So Joyce gave me that validation there.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I can still like love the natural outdoors and appreciate my backyard.
Yeah. You can have your backyard as your favorite place while also adventuring sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I really like when she was talking about, I'd love to take one of her classes. It'd be interesting. Like, I like this idea of a piece of writing and then everybody goes out and writes. I'm spinning about how maybe I could integrate that in with my students in the fall, but I have to think about that a little bit more. But
yeah. And I think if you were to take one of her classes, then you could definitely get some ideas there.
Mm-hmm.
There too. And really, it would be a good PD opportunity for a bunch of teachers to get together.
That's a good idea.
And take some classes. Yeah.
There you go. People with PD money, think about that.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, leave us a review on whatever app you're listening on, and send it to a friend who you think might be interested.
As always, thanks for listening and take care.